the burnout of like finding your way out of a company is sort of different to the burnout of growing the company.
You can be working a lot and hard, but if you feel like you're in control, it seems less like a chore.
Burnout isn't how much you work. Burnout is how much you don't see the fruits of your labor.
I have worked 80, 90 hours a week, and you end up really cranky, and you end up making a ton of mistakes. It's not really productive hours.
Hi, I'm Paul Bigger, founder of Dark.
I'm Edith, CEO and co-founder at Launch Darkly.
And you're listening to Be Continuous, a podcast about continuous delivery and software development.
You can get in touch with us anytime at our Twitter handle @ContinuousCast.
The show is brought to you by Heavybit. To learn more, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.
Hey, Paul.
Hello.
You're looking really well rested.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
How's work?
Work is good. I love work.
You love work?
Work is great.
When we started the podcast, you would not have said that.
Well, yeah, I was burnt out.
Well, how did you get over your burnout?
I took 18 months off.
How deep was the burnout that you needed 18 months?
Well, I had spent 4 years doing a startup.
I'm 5.5 years in with Launch Darkly.
Yeah, but the burnout of like finding your way out of a company is sort of different to the burnout of growing the company, I think.
Well, thanks for wearing the shirt today from Launch Darkly. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So tell me about your burnout. Like, how are you combating it now?
Well, now I don't have burnout. Like the work is wonderful. Wow. Yeah. I mean, burnout isn't how much you work. Burnout is how much you don't see the fruits of your labor. I mean, I don't know the exact mechanic behind this, but like you don't get burnt out from like, I mean, you probably get burnt out from working 100-hour weeks because you'd be tired and so on. But like you can get burnt out working 20-hour weeks.
Wow. So you don't think it's about the quantity, but rather the quality?
It is whether you see positive outcomes of your work. I mean, this is why people hate working for big companies, right? Because you spend 2 years and sure, you have a 40-hour week or whatever. And then, in 2 years, your feature has gotten shelved 3 times and you've, had a corporate reshuffle 6 times and you've had 4 new bosses. And like, that's where burnout comes from. That's why people work for small companies, Edie.
You just described life as a Googler, right?
I did. Yeah. It was specifically Google I was thinking of as I described it.
Yeah, I had a discussion with a friend once about the idea of agency. Mm-hmm. Do you know agency?
Yes.
That you can be working a lot and hard, but if you feel like you're in control, it seems less like a chore. Right.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like if you're doing stuff and like you're turning it into something, then you have that sense of achievement, and you don't want to be working yourself too ragged, but. There was all this stuff before Christmas about people talking about 60 hours or 80 hours. Where did that whole thing start?
It periodically like flares up on VC Twitter.
Right. It's VCs.
Periodically flares up of like, I think it was like 18 months ago, the guy from Sequoia wrote this article about the Chinese startups are all working 100 hours a week.
Oh, it was the 996, right?
Yeah.
9 to 9, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine the quality of work that they're getting accomplished.
Yeah, so I decided at the time to just stay out of it because I don't see much personal ROI in getting dragged into long tweet storms. Yeah. I remember in the early days when I was trying to get our seed together, so we were like 4 people really needed money, and some VC asked me straight-faced, how are you going to make sure everybody works 89 hours a week?
I see.
And in my head, I was like, I don't want people to work that hard.
Yeah.
And
was it a test? It probably wasn't a test, but like sometimes these people ask you to put up tests.
No, the VC was very serious. They said, how are you going to make sure that everybody works 80, 90 hours a week so that you get the stuff you need? And I have worked 80, 90 hours a week, and you end up really cranky, and you end up making a ton of mistakes. And it's not really productive hours.
So I'm not sure if I agree that 80-hour weeks are automatically mean that you're making mistakes. So I have a slightly more nuanced opinion here than 40 hours is the right.
I don't know. Thing. I don't think 40 hours is necessarily right. I think that saying 80 hours every week without fail is right also seems.
One of the things that you see VCs often promote is this sort of hustle porn.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more about what you mean by hustle porn.
Look at everyone in China working 996.
Yeah, I thought that article was ridiculous.
There's a bunch of that going on. And I think that there is a little bit of truth to it as well. Like all things, that you can get more done in 60 hours than 40 hours. You probably can't go much further than that without starting to make a lot more mistakes and seeing the trade-off. But also it depends a lot on, do you have environments that are conducive to getting shit done? Whether it's 20 hours or 40 hours or 60 hours. You can't just have like the hustle porn of work yourselves to the bone and that's going to solve all your problems, because that is not going to solve all your problems.
And also sometimes it leads to kind of this perversion of FaceTime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Butts and seats are the thing that's required.
Yeah, and then people find ways around that. Well, I'm going to be out of the office for 60 hours, but 3 of that is playing foosball.
Yeah.
And I mean 3 a day.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, so like I am there, but 3 hours a day of foosball, another hour of lunch, another hour of dinner, and it's like, okay, you're there, but you're not actually getting anything done. And wouldn't it be rather just for the company to say, like, get your stuff done and then go home?
How do you feel about the work-life inclusion?
Tell me more.
Maybe work-life integration is the thing. Like, a lot of people want to have...
You mean if you live and work in the same place?
No, that wasn't specifically what I was referring to. Thanks,
because how is that working out?
Yeah, it's working. We have an office.
Oh, separate from your house?
We have like 10 people now. Yeah,
and they're not in your home.
They're not in my home anymore. Not for like a year now.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's been since we've done a podcast, but that has changed. Do you remember we were in Heavybit for a while? Maybe you don't remember that.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was we moved them out of my house.
So work-life inclusion.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people value work-life separation correctly. There are people who really enjoy work-life integration. A common thing is that you hear about people in their early 20s who are like, they want to go to work and make friends with everyone there and play foosball together and eat 3 meals there and get a massage there. I don't know what else goes on. And Haircuts, there we go, in the Googles. So like there's people who want that and who enjoy that, and I think it is fine that exists, but it is not fine that that's a requirement.
Yeah, so we, my co-founder and I started the company when we were in our 30s. Mm-hmm. And our first engineer had a kid when he joined. So we didn't really do stuff at night.
Right.
Like sometimes we're like, hey, you want to do a happy hour? And they're like, I want to go home and see my kids.
Yeah, that's a thing that I hear people want to do when they have kids.
Yeah, so like our culture kind of formed around like we would go out to lunch together. Mm-hmm. We still have lunch brought in every day. We were a lunch company, we're a coffee company. Mm-hmm. But we never had like a culture of, Thursdays are Taco Thursday or something. Versus when I was in my 20s, like, I was very much, all my friends were at work and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's just an age thing.
It's certainly related to being an age thing. Like, I think it's also related to being a remote company. If you're remote, then like, you don't go to bars with your colleagues afterwards because they live in different cities or whatever.
Can you do like some non-weird FaceTime thing though?
I don't think you can do a FaceTime thing that's not weird.
Particularly like at a happy hour at a bar.
Yeah, could you imagine? I mean, that would be so Silicon Valley.
Particularly if like one person was in San Jose and the other in Lafayette or something.
Mm-hmm. And they both ride their, what are those things called? The sticks with heads?
The scooter that you wheeled in today?
No, the telepresence. That's it, telepresence robots.
That just sounds so creepy.
I guess they didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, so our culture, just because our early team had kids, was very much like we will hang out during the day, but nights are kid time. Yeah. To this day, like we went to see the Star Wars premiere, and we did that as an afternoon activity because we wanted people to see the movie in a matinee and then go home. Right.
We have people who are mostly in San Francisco. So actually 2 companies. One, so Circle was like largely remote. Certainly engineering was nearly all remote. A lot of people in their 30s, kids, that sort of thing from the very start. But there was also a couple of people who were younger and who actually did work all the hours of the day. And
so one correction.
Yeah,
we work all the hours of the day. It's just like.
So I meant all the hours of the actual day, not just the work day.
Yeah, like a really common pattern was the people with kids, they go home, they put the kids down, and then they get back on.
Oh, so you're saying that they're working a lot more than the 40 hours a week?
We don't want to encourage people to work crazy hours, but people do space them out. Like, they'll be like, hey, I will be in the office at this time. And then I want to have this 3 to 4 hour block to get my kid, feed him or her, put them down, and then I'll be back online.
Yeah.
And it does not have to be, hey, I'm in the office for that.
Right. We were very focused on getting people uninterrupted time. And I think that's one of the important things about having, like, successfully using the time you have.
That's
So you can't engineer things at 20 minutes at a time.
No. Yeah. So it's like the time you have shouldn't be chunked up by like, hey, I need to go play foosball right now.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things you hear about people with kids is that they get very good at using their time better. Like, suddenly they're not wasting hours on Hacker News or Twitter or whatever else.
That's what my co-founder certainly said. He's like, the time I spend, I want to make sure I'm spending it well.
Right.
How is it working out to have everybody here this time?
So we don't have everyone here. There's one person who's remote. He's in Florida. And then there's 9 in the office here.
Oh, fun.
It is fun, but it's also like, the office is a place where people get things done quietly for the most part. And I do enjoy having a little more office banter than we had at Circle. And I think people are quite social and enjoy being social. We also have, like, most people go home.
Yeah.
Some people, you occasionally see them working late, but they're employees, and our job is to get the most out of them, which means not the most time, but the most outcomes.
Yeah.
And the most outcomes require that people, get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And are happy in their lives.
Yeah.
And all that shit. And that's how people get really good work done.
I've been really focusing on psychological safety lately, which is just this idea that if you feel that you are safe, you do a much better job.
Sure. Say more about that.
Well, it's funny that you have to do studies to make it sound obvious. Before I made fun of Google, but they actually are really good about data-driven management. So they did a lot of surveys of their different teams about which were the most successful. And the teams they found were the most successful is the ones where they felt like people had the freedom to make mistakes.
That's funny. I saw some discussion of this on Twitter that had some other thoughts on the matter.
Go ahead.
I think it said something like, and I'm going to get this wrong, so the teams that had the most psychological safety were the teams with the least diversity. And that there was something along the lines of, it was not okay for underrepresented people to make mistakes in the way that it was for overrepresented people to make mistakes. Yeah, so it starts to get a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound so good anymore, does it?
No, I mean, the hope is that you create it, and this is what I tell our team is that we're a startup. We're doing the first thing.
Yeah. Well, and to be clear, psychological safety, good. Just making sure that everyone gets the psychological safety.
Yes. And also to put the guardrails in place that people aren't making like crazy mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that as we grew, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, and every company sees the same thing, that you hit an inflection point where the old processes don't work.
Oh gosh, every 6 months.
Yeah.
So
the thing that has made it really successful for us is like being proactive at figuring out what the guardrails are.
Yeah, I mean, so we've been basically doubling or tripling our team for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Once a year you double?
Basically once a year.
How many people are you now?
We're 160.
160.
So what I tell the team is that the stuff that worked last year is not going to work now.
Yep.
And we don't know what stuff is not going to work.
Do you...
So like some of it is going to work, some of it is not, and it's fine.
Do you prep for what's not going to work, or do you just like run it until it no longer works and just keep an eye out for it?
There's stuff we know isn't going to work, and then there's the stuff you don't know is broken until it breaks.
Okay.
Like there's some stuff where you're like, okay, the way we ran performance reviews when we were 8 people does not work when you're over 100.
Yeah.
So let's put some process in place and have some stuff. There's other stuff where you're like, oh shoot, this just doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
And then there's stuff that's just like a gradual evolution. Like we had our all hands today, and I'm a big believer in all hands. I started them when I was at TripIt out of my own frustration. We never had an all hands, and I was always like, who joined? What's happening?
Yeah.
So I started a program of doing monthly, we call them town halls there. And when we were 8 people at Heavybit, we didn't need all hands.
No. Everyone knows everything.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows everything instantly because we all sat like.
Yeah.
But when we got to 20, I started doing all hands.
Mm-hmm.
And they were pretty informal. Like I would just stand in front of the company and say, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And people would raise their hand and ask questions or ask me questions without raising their hands.
Mm-hmm. This was a thing that I did very badly at in the early days of Circle. So when we transitioned from, small enough to not needing all hands to larger where you need more coordination, I wasn't very good at adding in that coordination. With the fear that meetings are bad sort of thing. But what we ended up with instead is that everyone had to spend all this overhead trying to figure out what was going on and trying to figure out what to work on and trying to figure out what was important and that kind of thing. So I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah, it was management by osmosis.
Yeah, and it turns out that's expensive.
And also very error prone.
Both of these things, yes. When you don't have an explicit process that is setting some sort of direction, then people will pick their own direction.
Or have this ladder of, well, I thought I was supposed to do this because this person told me this, and now I feel hurt because...
Oh, yeah. Bad in many ways.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. If anyone's listening to this who's still doing the flat company thing, stop it.
Well, so all hands have gotten to be more and more of a production over time.
Of course, yeah.
Like now, like in the early days, it was just basically ask me anything style.
How remote are you?
We're about 15% remote.
15?
Yeah.
And are they in US time zones or what's the... Like, how do the remote people show up for the all hands?
Yeah, and I'm less and less fond of the word remote, to be honest. Because, we have a New York office.
Distributed?
Global.
So I was asking, how do the people who are not in the San Francisco office...
Oakland.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
You just lost our clean rating, by the way.
God damn it. Oakland.
Now we have to put explicit on this episode.
Really? For saying fuck?
Oh, you're just doubling down.
Surely we have to put explicit on every single episode that I've been involved in.
Unless I edit this one out, yeah.
Right. I remember I was on some podcast where someone asked me to not say fuck as much. Oh, it was it wasn't a
clearly left a great impression.
It wasn't a podcast. It was it was a conference in Salt Lake City.
Oh,
and
nice.
there was like a note in the speaker thing being like, we have a lot of people who don't enjoy profanity. Immediately forgot.
My mother listened to one of our podcasts about halfway through, and she's like, "It would be a good podcast if you two didn't swear so much."
Oh.
My mother also asked, bless her heart, she doesn't listen to the podcast. So she's on a bunch of standard boards for DevOps. And one of her questions to me was, I can't seem to find any good documentation on how to do open source management.
What is open source management?
Like management of open source projects.
Oh, yeah, because none of them do any management.
Yeah.
It's a complete fucking shit show.
She's like, I'm trying to do a standard for how to manage open source projects. And I'm like,
oh, well, if any of them had management, then...
So I'm trying to avoid the word remote because that implies that Oakland is the only place. I'm trying to use the word global because we have a New York team.
Some nice double speak there.
We have a New York team. We have people in London. We're about to put people in Sydney.
What time is your all hands?
11 a.m. Pacific Standard.
So if you're in London, that's 7 p.m. So it's not the worst.
Yeah. So
on a Thursday. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm sure people don't go out on Thursdays in London.
When I was in Sydney for work, I called into the all hands and it was 8 a.m.
Yeah, we were hiring people and we put on our website that within 4 hours of San Francisco, not realizing that included New Zealand.
Oh my, yeah.
New Zealand is 4 hours from San Francisco. Who knew?
Yeah, New Zealand's a great place.
Yeah, I've never been.
Oh.
Yeah, but we were actually trying to keep it within everyone within a 4 hour window. We wrote the wrong thing on the website basically.
That's a 4 hour window
of San Francisco.
Oh, flying out of time zone.
We are trying to keep everyone within a 4 hour window.
But they are.
Not 4 hours each way. That would be an 8 hour window.
Oh.
Yeah.
The wheel kind of turned just enough.
Yeah. And so San Francisco is one end of the window, and
yeah,
I don't know, Brazil or Argentina or something is the other end of the window.
Yeah. So all hands have gotten more and more, and you realize why big companies act the way they do.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was more ask me anything. Mm-hmm. Now we have people put in their slides ahead of time. Because we need to look at the overall length and make sure that it's not.
You don't have town halls where you can be asked anything.
We did that in the early days. Mm-hmm. We still now we have an anonymous question forum where people can ask anonymous questions.
Ooh, does everyone get to see the anonymous
No,
questions?
we screen 'em.
Yeah.
We did this at TripIt, and we screen them.
Yeah.
Just because they can be incredibly
mental.
personal or rude sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they can be at the point of like, there's no need to say this.
Some sort of Google memo thing going on.
Oh, just really mean stuff. Like, why is so-and-so?
Wow. Like calling out someone by name. And do you read that and think, why is so-and-so doing that?
Yeah, but like, well, I mean, at least at TripIt, like you want to have some sort of behind the scenes counseling of like, okay, what's going on? Let's go talk to so-and-so. Let's figure out what.
There's some dispute here that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, but that does not need to be.
That's not an all hands thing.
No.
Yeah.
It's not a live tweet.
I've seen someone read out things that were not vetted and it went predictably.
So now we're much more big company style. Like people have to submit their slides in advance. And everybody's like, why do we have to submit my slides in advance? Can't I just walk up and plug in my computer when it's my turn to go? And it's like, well, no, because then we spend the entire all hands.
Figuring out your computer.
Yeah. If we have 7 presenters, we don't have time for everybody to plug in.
That'll take the whole 40 hours that they're supposed to be there to figure out the projector.
Yeah. My joke is that the AV is the hardest part of any presentation. It's not a joke.
It's not humorous. So
Yeah. It's just literally like, oh, what's the password for the Wi-Fi? How do I get this on the screen in the right aspect ratio?
So how many hours do you work, Edie?
It depends on the week. I'd say between 50 to 70.
50 to 70. And how much of that would you say is like high quality work?
It depends on the week. It's funny, we're just past New Year's, and I really liked this past week because a lot of people were on holiday. And my joke was
so much done.
I could get so much done.
Yeah, it's so good.
But on the other hand, like I'm the CEO, like my job is all the stuff that has to happen when people are here.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Like I'm like, oh, I don't have any one-on-ones. I had far less one-on-ones because a lot of people were on vacation.
So did you take the time to think more and plan and that sort of thing?
Yeah, catch up. I mean, like do basic paperwork. And now it's kind of back in it, but like that's my job.
So my job is sort of odd, but it's sort of like part CTO, part coding, part management, part co-founder, part product direction. It's all a lot of things, and so there's a lot of it is just like code review and pairing with people and sort of spreading the knowledge of the code base or the product around. So I don't get very good blocks of coding during the work week. So at Christmas, suddenly there's no one to manage. There's no one-on-ones. I deleted 6,000 lines of code at Christmas week. It was fucking wonderful.
Yeah, I worked on a blog I've been sitting on for forever, which I sent to you for feedback.
Oh yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, so like there's all this stuff that like, what I've realized, it's about 5.5 years in, is there are many tasks where you're like, oh, this is just a 45-minute hour task.
Yeah.
But yet it's really hard to get to them.
You need to find time to get those tasks done. Yeah, like my email is my task that I don't get to. And I try to like put an hour or two at the end of the week to like keep my email vaguely under control.
I stay on top of email. I mean, the stuff that slipped over the past year, to be honest, is like the podcast.
Yeah. People write us and they're like, we want more podcasts.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'll say like, I love doing them, but I have to find a time that works for both of us. Yeah. And then we have to coordinate with Heavybit. And then there's the actual like getting here because I don't sit outside anymore.
Right. And then there's the editing.
Yeah. So, and the old.
I appreciate that you do all that work and that I just show up.
Well, I appreciate you coming. Yeah. It is time. And it's just when I get really busy at work, it just slides off the table. Because like the travel, just traveling a lot makes it hard.
Oh, yeah. Shit. I mean, you do a lot of travel, right?
Yeah.
You're the CEO who like shows up to sell.
Yeah.
That was never the CEO that I was.
You never sold up to sell?
I never showed up.
Like, period?
I mean, like 3 times to places in San Francisco.
What?
Yeah, no, the circle was like very bottom up.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously once they hired salespeople, things got a lot better. But we had $1 million contracts for people that were on a credit card and that we did not show up to do the selling.
Well, kudos to you to pulling that off.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Yeah.
Happened multiple times.
Kudos to you. I mean, we're big enough now that it's not just me. I mean, it's not like the early days. So Circle was one of our first 10 customers.
Yeah.
I remember my co-founder and I going to sell.
Aw.
Memories.
Yeah.
And that was after we'd done the podcast for a while.
Who were you selling to?
Jim Rose and Zuber
Yeah.
and Travis.
And did they buy?
Yes. I mean, Circle's been a customer for years now.
Nice.
You know this.
I mean, I was aware of it, but I wasn't clear at what stage it was brought in.
Oh, yeah. Circle, I think, was a very early customer.
One of the first.
And
We've been talking about getting launched Darkly in recently. We have a couple of homegrown feature flags in various places that we're, especially in our clients, that we're looking to.
Well, if you sign up, I'll get you a new T-shirt.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you. It needs a refresh. It's looking very tattered from wearing it every day for the last 4 years.
Yeah, man, But you travel now as your CTO.
I do the occasional conference, but I try not to. Yeah, I really don't like travel. It's like the stage that we're at as a company, travel, and I would argue that for the vast majority of startups, anything that involves travel is probably not beneficial. And the only things where I'd say it is beneficial are where you're doing top-down sales, founder-led top-down sales, and where conferences or events form an important part of your marketing. But I think a lot of people do conferences that are not an important part of their marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to disagree with you, but then you just said all my points.
Okay.
If you're doing some sort of category creation, I think conferences are incredibly important.
Was Launch Darkly doing category creation?
Yes.
Right.
Like, there was 2 questions when we started. Do you think feature flagging is useful at all? And it seems really obvious now, but like 6 years ago, a lot of people said no. And if you feel feature flagging is useful at all, do you want to purchase it from us? So there was a ton of education in the market.
I see. With Circle, CI, the CI market existed, or there's a CI-shaped hole in the market. And so it didn't really need all that much education, but I think it's now gotten to the size where education is important. But with Dark, there's a lot of, I guess you'd call it category creation. It's we don't have a good name for the category. We're kind of going with deploy list a little bit. But, what is this thing that we are building and why do you need it?
Yes.
Is a thing that we spend quite a lot of time doing.
Yeah. Do you need this and why us?
Yeah.
And I can look back at different conferences and trace back, like we got this customer or we got this employee from it.
Yeah, we've a lot of similar things.
Well, I think we kind of spun back around because at the beginning I said don't work too hard, and then I think you need to work hard enough and smart enough.
I mean, I think the major thing I would say around it is that like founders do need to work quite hard.
Oh, yes.
But it isn't fair to apply the same standards to your employees. Your employees are not 30% owners in the business. It's not the same at all.
Yeah, and I'll add 2 more nuances. I remember in the early days of Launch Darkly once, I was a little frustrated. I was like, nobody seems to care as much as me. And then I was like, well, wait a second.
Yeah. Imagine if they did. Like, you would be undercaring.
Yeah, like, of course I need to, of course John and my co-founder need to care more than anybody.
Yeah. We had a weird moment. I was dialed into a conference to our daily stand-up yesterday from home, and someone said, Paul, is that like an Aeron? Did you buy that yourself? And I was like, yeah, for my home office. And then I showed them my home office, and it's an exact replica of my work office. It's like same desk, same monitor, same everything, because like it's nice to come home. I have the exact same setup.
Paul, that makes me kind of sad.
Why? So just as you come into my house, so I live with Ellen, and her desk and my desk are just like in the little nook as you walk in. And it's great. It's wonderful. Like, I want to work a weekend. Great. I have a perfect setup. I don't need to go into the office for it.
The other nuance is I think you can work too hard and burn out, and that's incredibly dangerous.
I think so.
And you made a good point. It's not necessarily about hours.
It's not about hours. It's about making sure that you have good outcomes. And I think the most important part of it is recognizing when you're doing work that's not productive and like stopping.
Yeah.
So like if you find yourself, opening Twitter when you think that you're working, it's like just take a break. You're clearly distracted. You're not getting your best time, and you will do better by like going to sleep or just like sitting and reading a book or taking a walk or whatever.
Yeah. And then the third is that about 10 years ago, this guy came up with this book, The 4-Hour Work Week.
Oh, yeah. Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just this idea that you can just do absolutely nothing and get everything done.
I mean, it was all like, outsourcing it to other places, and someone was putting in 40 hours. It wasn't you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, you should outsource what you can.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure. I mean, don't do low value work or work that you can pay someone else to do.
Yeah, but at some point you need to do some work.
So in the old days, people had assistants. Do you have an assistant?
I do.
Okay. So nowadays, maybe CEOs have assistants. Sometimes executives have assistants. But it used to be that, like, the engineers had an assistant. There was maybe one assistant for 3 engineers, and there was like a secretarial pool.
I resisted having an assistant for a long time because I saw it as an elitist thing.
Yeah, same.
And finally what happened was the team said, hey, please get one.
Yeah.
And so John, my co-founder, and I share one. Like, it's really hard to schedule stuff with you.
Yeah.
Because we'll send you an email asking for a meeting, and then you try to get to it.
Yeah, and then it just never happens.
Yeah, so
was it mostly scheduling that was needed?
Scheduling, travel plans, helping with all hands,
Yeah.
and just basic stuff like I would book us restaurants for offsites, and because I'm like, oh, it's just 15 minutes. And the team's like, we want you to go answer my sales email or like do this and not mess around with booking a restaurant.
Yeah. The very first role that we hired both at Circle and at Dark was, I guess it wasn't quite assistant, but in the early days, the administrative person you hire has overlap between assistant and office manager, and that was wonderful in both cases. It was a thing that we never spent time setting up payroll.
Oh, I did that.
Yeah.
I did the payroll.
Finding offices, all this stuff is like stuff that you can leverage better as a founder.
I remember going down to City Hall to file our DBA.
Okay, I think I did that one.
Yeah, like it's really neat because it's right next to in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
We had to get a DBA because we were trying to get healthcare, and they're like, okay, the name don't match.
Yeah.
DBA in San Francisco is right next to the marriages.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so City Hall in San Francisco, in case you don't know, has this beautiful, beautiful building where like a lot of people actually go to get married there.
It's pretty, yeah.
It's not just like your, dumpy City Hall.
Yeah.
So it was actually really cool because I was sitting there like trying to form the business. And like when you're getting married, I think it's one of the happiest moments of your life. So there's all these kind of giddy couples and their families sitting there waiting too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of To Be Continuous, brought to you by Heavybit and hosted by me, Paul Bigger of Dark, and Edith Harbaugh of Launch Darkly.
To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. While you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.